Welcome back to Vox Terra. Today, foreign fighters, neo-Nazis, and the Azov regiment within Ukraine. My thesis today is that most media I've surveyed is dismissive and underreporting of this story. And this dismissiveness follows a pattern. And at the end, I'll bring in climate change as well. Start with the history of the rise of Nazism in Germany. After losing World War I, the German economy went into depression and inflation. Many historians blame this on the harshness of the Versailles Treaty. But during this time period, capitalism was being challenged on many fronts by those thinking we'd be better off replacing it with some type of a system of worker-controlled ownership under the banners of names like communism or socialism or even just radical unionism. The idea catching on was that the working people would control what Karl Marx called the means of production. Well, this idea obviously wouldn't sit well with many owners as well as many very wealthy people. So a counter solution, if you will, to these economic troubles, to this discontent within Germany in particular, rose up in the form of fascism or Nazism. According to my memory of the book Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, Hitler offered himself up as a bulwark against communism. Rather than blaming Germany's problems on a set of wealthy industrialists, he blamed the troubles on those who were not truly German, portraying communism as a Jewish plot. So the Nazi solution would basically leave the system of private ownership intact while confiscating eventually the wealth from those who are considered not real Germans, and then reestablishing a system of slave labor. Now, contrarily, the left would portray racism and ethnicism as a plot by the owning class to divide the workers. Underreported in our history, or undertaught in our history, is that during that time period, pre-Nazi takeover, there was pitched street battles between the German left, like communists and radical unionists, and the Nazis. But this way, Hitler was able to gain support from the German, what sometimes are called the industrialists, but not only at home, abroad as well. Again, undertaught in our history, meaning American history, is the elements that supported fascism or Nazism within our business community. There's the infamous photograph, underreported, of Henry Ford receiving a medal from the German Nazi Party in 1938. Now, after decades of Cold War and proxy war, the Soviet Union was eventually broken up and all of its publicly owned assets were then redistributed to private parties. So today, with that left-wing analysis discredited in the eyes of so many, it seems predictable to me that so many people wanting some form of an identity, wanting some form of a support network, are now going to turn to those philosophies that were opposed by the communists. But it wasn't just a rise in nationalist sentiments that brought down the former Soviet Union. It was also jihadism. And here, really underreported, undertaught about, was our support, which to some degree is still ongoing, for jihadist movements, at that time against the Soviet Union. In the 1980s, we supported what was called the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And then, as now, our media did not really tell the whole story. I can remember being a child or a youth during that time period, watching a 60 Minutes documentary on the Mujahideen, who were called freedom fighters by Ronald Reagan and, as I can remember, most of our media. And it was during this time period, this Mujahideen battle against the Soviets in Afghanistan, that the foreign fighters were pouring into Afghanistan. Included in those foreign fighters was Osama bin Laden. So that Mujahideen that we supported later evolved into the Taliban, which gave comfort to Al-Qaeda. Then along comes some time later the 9/11 attack, credited largely to Osama bin Laden, who gained his battleground experience in Afghanistan from our funding of our support for these movements to hector our enemies. Yet after that 9/11 attack, I thought there would have been some introspection by the media. I don't remember any. Most of those reporters then were older than I was at the time and should have remembered. Yet it was all not discussed. Well, today in the Ukraine, these fascist elements that are indirectly getting support from us are in the background. Reports are largely dismissive. I decided just to do a quick search. Immediately popped up an underreported Reuters article titled Ukraine's Neo-Nazi Problem, and that was a 2018 report. The accompanying photograph depicts a rally in Kyiv in 2017 that looks shockingly similar to the Unite the Right rally in the United States, carrying tiki torches and all. 2017 was also the same year as our Unite the Right rally. Yet where was the media coverage showing these parallels and the funding sources? Well, regarding this Azov Battalion you might have heard of, here's an Aljazeera article I found for you. Who are Ukraine's far-right Azov regiment? The far-right neo-Nazi group has expanded to become part of Ukraine's armed forces, a street militia and a political party. This unit was originally formed as a volunteer group in May of 2014 out of the ultra-nationalist Patriot of Ukraine gang and the neo-Nazi Social National Assembly. Both groups engaged in xenophobic and neo-Nazi ideals, physically assaulted migrants and the Roma community, and people opposing their views. The unit was officially integrated into the National Guard of Ukraine on November 12th of 2014. Now, I'll also share with you an MSNBC article regarding foreign fighters. Neo-Nazi and white supremacist extremist foreign fighters have sought training and combat experience by joining ultra-nationalist defense militias in Ukraine. Now, my point here is to say this should be a bigger story. Most media reports I've heard, if they mention it at all, are dismissive. I'll give you one example of an NPR news story I heard where the host made a comment like, well, if you are in danger, you're not going to question where your help is coming from. That's a truism. But the media also glossed over our support for jihadists. And years later, we saw the fruit of that. Look at how much the Middle East has changed. Well, with climate change coming down like a ton of bricks, also underreported and underemphasized by our media, people will naturally get more stressed and be susceptible to turning to the very angry voices that are getting us into this mess in the first place. We need to get our narrative out and expose the financial interests that are driving conflict, consumerism, and excessive fossil fuel use, so that as the world heats, people's heads can stay cool and focus on real solutions. Well, hey, I hope you found this really helpful and interesting, and if you did, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel. You give it Patreon to make this effort more sustainable. Comment, like, and until next time, and as always, peace be with you.